Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. I got a couple of bonus videos this week to make up for not doing enough videos last week, but also I wanted to knock these two out. My name is Stephanie Bree. This is Horror Trans. I am a transgender woman. I talk about all things horror. And today I'm taking a second look at Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And my previous Rent or Buy review was just me saying, fuck this movie for 30 seconds, and then I got pissed off. Um, but I want to dig into this movie a little bit because I don't hate it as much as I sometimes portray online, especially on Twitter. Um, I attack this movie a lot, and I have my reasons for attacking this movie. And it is exceedingly frustrating to me that this is a lot of people's either favorite Nightmare on Elm Street or the only one they like. Because fuck off. This isn't even a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So if this is the only one you like, what is wrong with you? I don't understand. Nightmare on Elm Street's literally my favorite movie of all time. This is my. You got to get down. I'm burning incense. You got to get down. Uh, this is my favorite film franchise next to Star Wars. All right. So now we've laid the groundwork. Let's talk about the movie. So Wes Craven's New Nightmare backstory, real brief, is the brainchild of Wes Craven, obviously, and it was his way of putting the Elm Street Freddy Krueger franchise to rest. Now that's all fine and well, except for they already did Freddy's Dead, which, let's be honest, killed the franchise. Whether it was intending to or not, it was definitely the end of the franchise. All right, buddy. So you have to sit down. You got to sit down. You got to sit down if you're going to be up here. You got to sit down. Okay? If you can't sit down, you can't be up here. Wes Craven is not a fan of these subsequent Elm Street films, which I am. So that's my problem. My first problem with this movie is you have a guy who has no love or respect for the franchise coming in to capstone the franchise. And so the movie is not a Nightmare on Elm Street at all. What it is real life New Line Cinema, real life Heather Camp, set in the real world. And what they're doing is they're trying to make another Freddy Krueger movie. But it establishes in this movie that the entire Elm Street saga never happened. Instead of being, the events of the movie being, the mythology we grew up with and we grew to love, they throw all that out the window and they just say, no, the movies were just movies. Those were just movies, which is my first problem with this movie because it completely dismisses, disrespects, and shits on not only the franchise, but the franchise's fans. This movie is a middle finger to people who like Dream Master or Dream Child, which pisses me off because I love Dream Master and Dream Child. So this movie is very disrespectful to the fans, which pisses me off. And it is divisive. This divided the Elm Street fans unnecessarily into Scary Freddy versus Funny Freddy, which is bullshit because Freddy's always scary and always funny. He was both in the first movie, and he was both throughout the entire franchise. This myth that he became a cartoon caricature is mostly a myth. He did not actually become a cartoon character until Freddy's Dead, which was the end of the franchise. And that was on purpose. That was by design because they wanted to turn the fans off from the franchise. So they were like, all right, we're done. We're walking away. Thank you very much. Good night. That was the whole purpose of Freddy's Dead. So for the filmmakers, the studio, Wes Craven, the actors, and everybody involved to say, never mind, the entire franchise you know and love, haha, never happened, fuck you, you're not a real fan, unless you like this movie, New Nightmare, which pisses me off. It really does. It's very disrespectful. Second point I have to, before I get into the, nitty gritty of this movie, is I hate fucking meta shit. I hate it when Horror movies are self-referential. I hate it when they break the fourth wall. I hate it when they talk directly to the audience. I don't want that in a horror movie. Do it in Saved by the Bell, fine. That's the whole point of the show. Do it in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you're gonna get my middle finger up your ass. I hate that. I fucking hate it. Which is why I was surprised that I liked Scream, because Scream does it in a way that is respectful to horror fans. This movie disrespects horror fans, and that is why it offends me and it pisses me off. Because this movie is like, you have no reason, right, or, um, you know, right or whatever to enjoy those films. You have to like this one and only this one, or the first one and only this one, and the rest of them you're not supposed to like. And I hate that. That's Wes Craven's attitude, and that's my only gripe with Wes Craven, is he just doesn't have any respect for the fans of this franchise. Now, obviously, he did have much respect for horror fans in general with the Scream franchise, which was, in a way, almost an apology for this movie, you know? So they're making a movie, and the evil entity in this movie is not Freddy Krueger, but it existed in the Freddy Krueger franchise, and it was placated as long as they were making Freddy Krueger movies, which is a plot point I am not a fan of, because not just all the shit I've already talked about, disrespecting the franchise and the fans and everything else, but also the arrogance of Wes Craven to assume that some benevolent eldritch entity would be so enamored by his creation and not any other horror franchise is beyond me. If this evil entity did exist and it was placated by an evil entity doing evil entity things, why would it be satisfied with being a child molester, murderer, monster, instead of like a faceless shape like Michael Myers? Obviously, Wes Craven couldn't make this, New Nightmare about the Halloween franchise because he never worked on those, and obviously didn't have the rights, blah blah blah. But that would have, as a horror fan, as a fan fiction, that would have made this plot point more believable and acceptable to me. But it is what it is. The entity is pissed off, I guess, that there's no more Freddy movies, which is not true because they're actually making another Freddy movie. So even within the logic of the movie, they're breaking their own rule. They're literally saying the entity can't is only contained as long as they're making Elm Street movies. But now that they're not making Elm Street movies anymore, the entity is out in the real world and wreaking havoc. Except they are making another Elm Street movie in this movie. So the entity would have, by the logic of this movie, been satisfied with that. But instead, the entity possesses the now mechanical robotic Freddy glove, which doesn't make sense because Freddy Krueger never came across to me as an electrical computer engineer, and he wouldn't know shit about computers. We see this in Freddy's Dead, where he, I don't know, tries, I guess, to play a Nintendo game. Whatever. He obviously doesn't understand video games or technology. He's never used technology in any of the franchise before. So I'm getting on a tangent. So even within the logic of this movie, they break the movie's logic, which is another thing that pisses me off. Not just about the movie doing that, but people being okay with that and defending this movie because that's indefensible. You can't say, here's an unbreakable rule, and then turn around and break the rule in the movie. You can do it in a sequel. You can ignore the rule, brush it off in a sequel, but this movie never got a sequel. But in the established mythos of this movie, they already broke their own goddamn rule. Because in the movie, Robert Englund is dressed up as Freddy, acting as Freddy, making appearances as Freddy. The entity should have been satisfied with that. So why did the entity say, "Oh, whatever"? It doesn't fucking make sense. So you can defend it all you want, but you can't because it's indefensible. So you can like this movie, But you have to at least admit that's bullshit. And the way it shits on the fans of the previous films is also bullshit. Uh, Now, the the B plot of this movie is Heather Langenkamp has a stalker, which is the entity, who is trying to get her to reprise her role as Nancy, which again, whatever. I've already beat this horse. I've already beat this horse to death. I can't deal with this. This is why I screamed "fuck you" at the camera for 30 seconds the last time I talked about this movie, because that's all it makes me want to do every time this movie's brought up. I just want to scream "fuck you" at the camera. Fuck you at Robert Shea for letting this happen. I would say fuck you to Wes, but he's dead, so no disrespect. Fuck you to the fans that like this movie and hate the other ones, because fuck you, you know. Not you, viewer, but I mean the obnoxious fans that are like, this is the only good one. Well, then you're not an Elm Street fan. So you have no right to have an opinion on the other films. If this is the only one you like, leave us alone. Those of us who enjoy the other films, let us enjoy the other films. Stop getting on your high horse and saying this is the only good one. No, this is the only one you enjoy. Fair enough. Fine. It ain't the only good one. So you need to knock it off with that bullshit right now. The other problem I have with this movie is the established character, Freddy Krueger, is a monster, but he's also playful. He's sadistic. He plays with his victims. He plays on their fears, and he has fun with them. The entity in this movie does nothing fun. It's just pure evil, and it only does evil things. There's no comedy at all, which is why I don't like this, because even in the original movie Wes Craven created, Freddy had comedic elements, you know? He maybe wasn't spouting one-liners yet, but he's only in 7 minutes of that movie. He didn't have enough screen time to spout the one-liners yet. Which he does, by the way, in part 2. So, whatever. But he also does a lot of comedy stuff in the first movie. You know, at least sadistic, you know, dark humor. Which that was always a part of the character. Dark humor. There's not even dark humor in this movie. There's no humor in this movie. This movie's too serious. It's too, this movie's melodramatic. And none of them, even the original, was not melodramatic. Which is another one where people defend this. They're like, oh, I like the original, and I like this one because this one's the most similar in tone to the first one. I'm like, do you not remember the entire comedic bit about the airport tape that goes wrong? That was comedy. That was in the original. This franchise has always blended horror and comedy. So when people say, oh, I like this one because there's no comedy, then why do you watch the original? There's comedy bits all throughout the movie, all throughout the franchise. It was always a horror comedy franchise. More horror than comedy, and then it leans into the comedy starting with part 4 and 5. It goes a little over the top with part 6, but it was still a scary franchise. Freddy Krueger was always a scary monster. So when people say this is the only scary one, I'm thinking, what are you, sadistic? Are you demon possessed? I mean, do you not have a soul? Those other movies were scary, especially if you watched them as a kid. Yeah, if you're the first time you're watching any horror movie, regardless, as a 35-year-old who's seen a bajillion horror movies, nothing's going to be scary. No fucking shit. Anyways, I'm done talking about this movie. This is a fucking don't even talk to me about this movie. Don't watch it. If you like it, fine. Just leave me alone and stop bringing it up. I do not like this movie, and I hate how disrespectful it is to the fans. I'm a fan. This movie literally disrespected me personally and people like me, which, by the way, judging by the sales numbers of the other movies, there are more of us than there are of you. Because this movie bombed, rightfully so, and Dream Master is the highest grossing movie in the entire franchise, not counting Freddy vs. Jason because that's a crossover. So, those people who don't like Dream Master, guess what? More people liked it than didn't like it. Get over yourselves.